How are you doing today? Welcome to the studio.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I'm so glad to be here.
It's great to have you on the West Coast.
Yes, I'm from New York originally, but I've been out here a few times,
Mhm.
so it's good to be on the West Coast. But I'm in Vegas a lot every year because of the broadcast conference. So I haven't been to LA in about 5 or 6 years. So
Okay.
it's good to be here.
Well, I just moved here. I've only actually been here for just under 2 years now, and I was born in Canada, and I kind of traveled all around the world. I lived in China,
Oh,
Dubai,
I did my
Switzerland.
yeah, I
Mm.
did my Fulbright in China, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Where were you? Beijing?
I was in Beijing, Xi'an,
Mhm.
Kunming,
Oh, wow.
Lijiang,
Mhm.
and Shanghai.
Wow, you've seen some stuff.
I've seen some stuff.
I was based in Shanghai for 18 years.
Oh, yeah,
Mm.
I have some wonderful music from Shanghai.
Yeah.
I remember when I came back and I had this music and they said, "Wow, you have Chinese rap?" I said, "Yes," and it was very interesting and a whole lot of fun hanging out in those clubs. Whole lot of fun.
Absolutely. I was there from 2001 to 2019, just about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was there 2004.
Okay. Well, we might have overlapped a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
That's wild. So look, I know you've written a book, Midnight Train from Georgia, based on your brother-in-law's life as a musician and being part of the incredibly world famous band.
Well, yes, William Franklin Guest of Gladys Knight and the Pips.
But I would love to kind of go into your backstory a little bit, kind of understand where you're from and what kind of brought you to the stage of wanting to write this book of your sister's husband.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just start. I'm from New York.
Mhm.
I was born in Harlem, one block from the Apollo Theater. So I was born, sort of brought up in music. My father was a lead singer of a gospel quartet,
Mhm.
the Morning Doves. And my parents kept us at the Apollo quite frequently. In fact, my sister and I know this is before your time, but we won the twist contest,
Oh
Chubby
wow. Okay.
Checkers Twist. I won for the little girls, she won for the big girls. So every Wednesday, my mother would like to go to the Apollo. We would sit in the box seat because I was amateur hour.
Mhm.
So, in fact, I was sort of raised in Catholic school. So I was in the choir. There was one time that I thought I was going to help save the world through music. But ironically, to go back a little bit, when I got to college in New York, because again, I was brought up in music and I was also in advertising. I was a copywriter, producer, so I knew a lot of the entertainers. Now, my sister met my brother-in-law when I was 11 years old, and she actually met him as a as a result of a relationship my mother had with their manager at that particular time, or who was going to be their manager in New York, Bobby Robinson, which is part of the book. So I William comes in, Patton, my sister's name is Patricia.
Mhm.
They start dating, or he got say he was interested in her because she was quite young at that point, like 16 years old.
Mhm.
And they went on later on and started dating and got married. As far as my particular path, um, after high school, I, did not necessarily want to go to college right away because I was interested in the arts. I was already a dancer. My sister and I were dancers.
Mhm.
And believe it or not, I was interested in film.
Oh.
So I went to film school for a bit when it was AB roll
All right. Yeah.
during that time. And then so I had these lofty ideas. I was always writing, from a kid. I wrote poetry. And then I was also in Catholic school where you weren't supposed to talk,
Mhm.
and we didn't talk much. So I wrote a lot, but I was also the kid that was different from my siblings. I was the one who really stayed in my head a lot. I was always thinking, crafting, trying to put things together. And I'm a builder, which has helped me with my career. because ironically, when I go home to New York, everyone thought that I was going to be an artist. I end up being a professor, a dean, a vice president, president, and all of these other things in education. So, but how I got into education was a result of what happened in the music business.
Sure.
So that's how that started. Again, I was introduced to music very early. I actually lived in Jamaica for 6 months, so I was hanging out with Johnny Nash and those people because again, my brother-in-law, by the time I was, 18, 19, 20 years old, they got married when I was 16, so I already knew a lot of entertainers just by the mere fact of following them through different, studios and different venues where they were performing.
Mhm.
So,
What was it sorry to interrupt, what was it like growing up next to the Apollo? I mean, again, it's before my age, but I know a little bit of history and the talent that went through that building.
but the talent, that's what I'm saying. It was amazing,
Mm.
and what you saw on amateur night was like no other. Some of these entertainers, like the whole thing with the Apollo, if you got the Apollo audience to clap and just root you on, then you you have a career
Mhm.
going ahead. I mean, little Stevie Wonder, I remember seeing him at 11, 12 years old with fingertips blowing the harmonica. And as I said, my sister and I won the dance contest there. We always sat on the left box seat if you're looking at the stage, that's where we always sat so we could hop over the wall
Mhm.
and go up to the stage. So this was a very, very important time and an important place for artists because if you did not win over that Apollo audience, you weren't going too far.
Mhm.
Okay, I mean they actually came out there with the horns and stuff, and like they would just sweep you off the stage. So I mean when to give you an idea, when we won the dance contest, the twist, we had friends in the audience. We had the Pips and other groups that were actually they were performing. It just so happens that they were also performing. So we had people rooting for us backstage and rooting for us in the audience. And as I said, my sister and I were dancers. I mean, I even studied at Minnesek, which was a community center. That's how we sort of grew up in New York in the arts in the community centers. Debbie Allen,
Mhm.
the dancer, producer, and the extraordinary Debbie Allen, she also, um, went to Minnesek as far as the community center
Mhm.
and stuff, and they had various dance programs and various things that, young people could get involved in as far as the arts. So that was the training ground. It wasn't going to even though you could go to school for that, but that wasn't, in your head at the time. In fact, I had no idea that I was going to be in entertainment, which I was. I even had a number 1 song myself that I wrote and produced,
Mhm.
a number 1 disco song in 1975, "Time Moves On" by Strut. You can look it up. It was a great song. It was number 1 in Record World on Brunswick Records. So, that's the direction I thought I was going into because, as I said, I lived in Jamaica. When I left New York and that 6 months in Jamaica and hanging out with Johnny Nash and Byron Lee and the Dragoneers, which is a Jamaican group, and, a lot of the entertainers, etcetera. I decided to get a guitar
Okay.
because remember I said I wrote poetry.
Mhm.
So I just sort of transitioned over into writing music. So when I came back home, I was, the dancer model that left and all that when I came back home. I had an afro this big. I had a guitar. My mother, they didn't even recognize me,
Mhm.
but because I was on a whole different path for that, period of time. So I started writing music. And again, because of my brother-in-law, I knew a lot of people in the business. I knew producers, I knew record companies, etcetera. So I started writing. Luckily, I met Benny Clark, who was a great arranger, producer. I happen to love strings
Mhm.
as far as the music, and time moves on. If you look at or if you get to listen to it, there's a lot of strings. That was during the time that they used not the sort of digital strings, but I mean the real strings and horns and stuff. So it's a lot of that. And the arranging was so important,
Mhm.
back during that time. I would call it like really just pure music.
Mhm.
So, from that period of time and right along the same time as around 1975 or whatever, and I was like running the company. I used to be executive vice president of Patton and Guest Productions.
Okay.
That was my brother-in-law, William Guest, and Edward Patton, the other Pip,
Okay.
okay, who was in the middle. He was almost like my papa. So I also created a product called Disco Bells
Okay.
that were, if you look at Saturday Night Fever and you see John Travolta walk in and
Yeah.
he does like that, he's wearing Disco Bells. They were in Cosmopolitan magazine, they were in Essence, etc. So I actually went to India
Go on.
and got the brass, and, that's where they made the brass and the bells to do product control. I mean, I wrote, but I had their backing. I wrote a $100,000 bank proposal. I mean, I was like 22 years old, 23, and got 50,000 of it.
Oh.
So, but again, I had the Pips backing. So we had that product. We also produced a song, Put on Your Dancing Bells with that. So that was the kind of stuff that I was doing in the 70s.
That's insane that you were surrounded by that much musical talent and you were able to just kind of absorb all of that from so many really talented people and then also find your own way and kind of mix business in with that.
Right. Because again, that was not sort of a path that I was on. I was considered as, a kid, pretty smart and stuff, and we'll get into all of that stuff when we get into my higher education, um, part of my life, etcetera. So, believe it or not, I was also, a kid who did not really talk. I wrote everybody letters.
Mhm.
So I wrote my mother used to make a joke about that, said, "Don't go to sleep on this child. If she's upset about something, you'll find a letter waiting for you by your coffee."
Right.
So I was sort of very internal, introverted, and all of those things. I am actually a trained extrovert. And I guess that has a lot to do with my broadcasting and performance because I'm still really an introvert. I stay in my head a lot, but that's how I write and that's how I create. So, from that, just as a child, just being in my mind and writing those letters, I just went from different genres, letters to music, poetry, and then academic journals and academic books, etc.
Mhm.
This is the first sort of commercial book that I wrote. But getting back to, I'm trying to give the timeline here.
Mhm.
So in the 70s, around um, in the 80s, late 70s or so, the group, because when I start talking about the book, that goes back to the 50s, but they were starting to sort of separate at that particular time. I actually hopped into school at the time when the group was having some problems. And I ended up in Baruch College, which is in part of the City University of New York.
Mhm.
Now, ironically, I mentioned Disco Bells. Baruch was using that product as an example of new product marketing.
Oh, wow.
I could not let them know that I was the person who created that because I was there on financial aid and scholarships and stuff like that. It's like, oh, wow.
Mhm.
Well, ironically, because I was in the business school, but ironically, I met a journalism professor my first couple of weeks there because I still had a secretary, so I used to actually go to school, change clothes in the car, meaning just put on my high heel boots or whatever and change my little jacket, then go into the record business. I still had a secretary. Well, I met a journalism professor who said, knew that I also had a background in commercials. I was a copywriter, radio producer for a pretty major advertising agency, Rosenville Sierowitz and Lawson at that time in New York. I wrote for Smith's Beer, Uncle Ben's Rice, and etc. And I used the entertainers even with that. Hubert Laws, the flute player, he did a musical track for one of my Uncle Ben's Rice commercials that Vi Higginson, who was a very prominent and still is a prominent she was, actually she's no longer in radio, but she was, like, one of the top radio DJs at that time, and during the time in New York, WBLS and WVIR, etcetera, WBLS was the station.
Mhm.
Well, she was the voice behind my commercials. So they must have played him about 10 years, but Hubert Laws, again, because I knew entertainers, I got him to do a musical rug and, and not at the expense that they would actually, charge for a production such as that.
Mhm.
But, coupled with that and being in the studio, like when we did, one of the records, Put on Your Dancing Bells, was the first time that the 24 track studios were coming into being.
Mhm.
So here I am again, I'm in my early 20s, I'm with these, and I'm in a 24 track studio that could put violins, viola, all of those things and mix this music, which was incredible. So, I was just having a ball. But when it got to the point where the group was not going to come back together and they were really going in their separate ways. And again, when we get to the book, I'm sort of overlapping my story because it all sort of fits together. I stayed in school because they just kept paying me to go to school.
Mhm.
Again, so I used the brain power that my mother, she did not want me to be in music, period. Even though my sister was married to a very successful entertainer, but she says, "You have brains, you can do something else." And, she says, "I worked too hard to send you to school, and you're out here, playing your guitar, talking about peace and love, and all of that stuff," which was a part, of my particular era.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you, like, you go to Jamaica for 6 months, you come back with a big afro and a guitar. Like, I was just curious why you didn't try to pursue music, originally. I mean, it seemed like you had a lot of other ideas in your head about business and about schooling and about other industries, but
Yeah, but I was when I left New York, I was doing I was modeling.
Mhm.
So again, it was when I got to Jamaica, and what happened was because I only went there for 2 weeks, but I talked myself into managing a guest house.
Mm.
Okay, and I got this gig managing the guest house. I got Johnny Nash's arranger and his wife. I got an editor of a magazine. I got these entertainers to move into this guest house.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's how the music thing. I mean, I'm there 6 months. I'm really into music. I'm, loving hanging out with Johnny Nash and all of them. I have his arranger and wife living in my guest house, so I'm hearing this music all the time. So it was very simple. Okay, I need to play a little bit, so I decided to buy this guitar.
Mhm. That must have been such an inspiring time.
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, it was so much love and so much music during the time, which was great, like the 60s, 70s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, because I could go back to Frankie and Louis Lyman. Frankie Lyman. I don't know if you know that name, but he was a pop singer from way the teenagers. That was their group, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. They were major stars. My sister went to school with them
Mhm.
up at Stitt High School. So we were just surrounded in this area. But even where we lived, I tell people, like, I lived next to the Polo Grounds. That's where the Dodgers actually started.
Oh.
And then they would have race cars in the fall. So we got a chance to see baseball. The kids there got a chance to see race cars. We go across the bridge to Yankee Stadium, and then you have the Yankees. So there was so much going on. And then again, I was in Catholic school, so I was singing in the choir. I tell people that's why I sing so high because I was singing that soprano.
Mhm.
And if you know anything about Catholicism, a lot of the voices, are up there. I had two bands, and we did some tri-state stuff, but I did not do any recording with my, groups or stuff, but I was still sort of singing and hopping around town. But, it was the big thing was you could go anywhere on 125th Street, the Baby Grand, Small's Paradise, all of that, and just hop through the night and hear incredible groups and incredible music. Some that, may not have been major stars that you wouldn't have known, but locally,
Mhm.
they were the hits for the community. They had the music. They were replaying a lot of the artist songs, but they were just absolutely, incredible. So that just growing up, in that environment, and again, I had the parents they probably call it child abuse now, that would go out, and when they would come back home, they would wake us up to dance and play music,
Mhm.
and we would all dance and play music. It didn't matter if it was 1 or 2 in the morning, because we were a family who just loved music and dancing and stuff, and as I said, my father was the lead singer of the Morning Doves Gospel Quartet, so, to have my father sing and he could dance.
Mhm.
I went to my first dance at 7 years old,
Mhm.
with my parents, so I just was brought up in that. But the other part of that, and I tell people and I even tell my students that I was sort of blessed with the right brain and the left brain, and throughout my life, I have sort of incorporated both sides to the various things that I do.
Mhm.
So by the time, as I said, I hopped in Baruch. I changed to journalism because I had the professor knew that I was already a copywriter, producer, and said I need to be in that. So I double major in journalism and music.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I majored in composition.
Okay.
Again, I love strings, so I could write for strings without even hearing it. They would have the string, quintet or something come in at the end of the semester and play the music that you had written.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and, even now, because I'm going back a little bit to my piano, because I wanted to play piano so bad that as a kid, I would go visit pianos in department stores because that's what I wanted to do. And it's so interesting because I knew sort of the musicality, the technical part. I was good at writing and, just understanding how to put everything together.
Mhm.
I've never become a great piano player, but I can use the piano to write songs.
That's amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I mean, like, you had a musical influence from your parents that loved music.
right.
You were dancing at a young age. You were in the church system. You were surrounded by Gladys Knight and the Pips. You were next door to the Apollo. Like, that's incredible.
You're right. And, the Catholic school is my 3rd baptism, believe it or not. When I was born, my parents were Methodists. Then they sent me to Florida for a year before I could go to school, and my grandparents, they were Baptists. They baptized me again, and then they brought me back when they had turned Catholic, so I went from this great gospel and hollering and people falling out to complete silence.
Mm.
I mean, So by the time I became an adult, I also started studying Buddhism.
Oh, wow.
Because that made me very, very curious about religion. Because when I came back after, as I said, that was my third baptism. And when I went to Catholic school, it was a fluke that I went to Catholic school in the first place. My mother had a 1 day off. I was skipped twice when I came back from Florida. Public school said that I should have been going to the second grade. I was going to the fourth. They said that I was much too small and they could not even fit me in. So my mother took me over to Father Dugan and said, I have 1 day off of work and I need to get her to school. So I'll get a second job and pay her tuition if you all would take her. So they looked and says, yeah, but she really is a little bit too small to be going to fourth grade. So, but they decided to put me in the third. So I still ended up being skipped once. But I'm telling that story because when I first went to school and they started saying that everyone who's not Catholic is going to go to hell, they had problems with me because I started screaming that my grandmother's not going to hell. She's Baptist. So my mother had to come to school.
Religion can be strange.
Yeah. So my mother had to come to school and she says, look, I'm not going to let her believe that. And she just told me to just keep quiet.
Mhm.
So, but again, so many things that I've learned from those experiences and discipline. As I cross my hands right now, I think about how I would sit in those classrooms,
Mhm.
and I still sit like that. I was in August, I was up there with some of my resurrection school classmates, and we hang out sometimes from grammar school, and we all still sit like this
Yeah.
with our hands folded. But, that discipline and all of that has really helped me
Mm.
throughout life.
Yeah.
So by the time I go through Baruch and I'm a double journalism and music major, then my dean decided, well, you can't stop now. Again, the left side, the brain was working. So he wanted me to meet some people, some recruiters for graduate school.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I was in Southern Illinois University because by this time in journalism, I sort of won all the journalism awards when I graduated, about 7 awards. I was the managing editor of the paper. I was the director of the radio station. I did the first video newscast for them. I'd worked the 1980s elections with Cronkite.
Mm.
I, had my name like in history. So I went from that kind of production, the music, to television.
Oh, wow. That's quite a leap.
Well, it wasn't a leap. This just happened gradually. I was in journalism. I was in New York City. I got internships. I interned at CBS for 2 years. I interned at Metro Media. So I was exposed to, journalism and broadcasting specifically. I was director of the radio station, and the guy I was dating was a videographer for cable news. So I introduced Baruch
Wow.
to video doing one of the first video newscasts. So by the time um, I graduated, although the only thing about being in the number one market, it's all union. So you can't really touch and, do all of the things. But they used to do things like they would say, oh, Deanna, there's a bomb threat. I need you to take the subway and go to this phone booth and call us back. Call the station back. Tell us what you see. Keep reporting. So, but I had the bug by that time.
Mhm.
That was exciting to me to be in a phone booth calling the station or to be there at 5 in the morning getting all the complaints about what people didn't like to see on the air.
Mhm.
So by the time I got to graduate school and I went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, which was the third in the country at the time for radio television. So I walked right in, got my own TV show,
Wow.
got my radio stuff. I did a series because I'd gotten there and all of these women were being raped and nobody was talking about it.
Mhm.
So I did a 7-part series called Rape is a Reality, and even interviewed prisoners
Hmm.
and, got won my first UPI award, 2nd place. So
That
and
kind of reporting must have been way ahead of its time. Sorry to interrupt you, but just like thinking about that in the 80s and
yeah,
how it just wasn't talked about.
it wasn't talked about, and that's why when I went that's why I had to do it,
Mm.
and Southern Illinois was they were really in the heart of innovation.
Mhm.
So it was, "Okay, you wanna do this?" Because I remember, um, because they actually when I used to go into the prisons
Mhm.
too, and I remember, because I was on television, so I would get these calls, and I used to have to get these people investigated, and they would tell me, "Don't worry, they're never gonna get out." But I wanted to, um, interview someone who was a rapist,
Mhm.
to get and what we did not what we did, and we were scared, we thought we were gonna get kicked out of school because we did not really we couldn't I just had the audio, so we could not put we used some of the audio, but I wanted a TV version. We used the audio for the radio
Mhm.
part, but I wanted to do something on TV, so we used the camera as the rapist
Oh, wow.
to go through that. So, again, um, as I said, I was doing a lot of television with me being on the air, created a lot of shows, some outdoor shows. I mean, I even did a show on bass fishing
Oh, wow.
and stuff. And I didn't climb any mountains like you, but, whatever I could do. But even my first march, because in the 60s, I was too young. My sister was out there, but I wasn't. So I didn't march, for race relations or anything like that. But my first march was in Carbondale, Illinois. And guess what it was? It was for um, black radio to keep it on the air for the weekend. It
Oh,
wasn't
interesting.
on 7 days a week. It was just on for the weekend.
Mhm.
So we had to march for that. So I did a lot of different things, and it woke me up to the fact that, you grew up in New York City, there are different worlds out here and these different places because I tell people that, the places that I've lived in Southern Illinois, even like the South and stuff, has taught me more than any of my 3 degrees.
Yeah, just moving around and talking to different people with different backgrounds and different ways of life is such an education.
Right,
Mm.
right. And I was talking to my roommate in college. I had a white female roommate. Well, we had a big Volkswagen van,
Mhm.
and it looked like a big hippie van.
Mhm.
Well, we broke down in a place called Pinckneyville, Illinois, and there were no people of color living there. But it was like about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were by a grocery store. They were actually calling people to come look at us. We were scared to death.
Wow.
you know, just sitting in this van. So, just going through all of those, experiences just coming. So by the time, again, I just went to Southern Illinois for a master's degree in radio and television.
Mhm.
But here's the story. 2 weeks after I got there, my father passed.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And yeah, when I went to school, and I was a daddy's baby, and I don't know why, but you wouldn't know this guy either. But Professor Shipley, Ben Shipley, is one of my professors, and he used to do Chase Manhattan bank commercials.
Okay.
And he would take off his glasses. You have a friend at Chase Manhattan, but he had that voice, that really broadcasting voice. So he was one of my professors, and I went to him and told him I had to go home because, like, my father basically faked it for me. I would have never left for school if I knew he was ill,
Mhm.
but he faked it for me. And as I said, 2 weeks after I got there, he passed. And I remember Professor Shipley. He made the sign of the cross, so I knew he was Catholic, and for some reason, I just said, "Now I'm gonna be Dr. Ziegler." I don't even know why I said it,
Mhm.
you know, but it was like something innate that wanted to pay something spiritually to my dad. I don't even know where it came from to this day. So, but I knew I did not want to back home. So again, then they started I did the master's degree, then they gave me another assistantship, and I overlapped my master's with the first semester of my PhD because I did both degrees in 3 years. I did my
Uh-huh.
undergraduate in 3 years. And, I remember my last year, they gave me a fellowship. I had to sign something that says I would not work because I was doing so many different things. I was doing the shows and all of that, but that's the energy. I still have that crazy energy now that it doesn't take long for me to get bored. I have to, do something and create something because I just have that energy.
Well, you just answered my question actually, because I was gonna ask you, how hard was it for you to give up music and kinda walk away from music and pick up a career in journalism and then television, and you seem to be a natural career academic, like
Right.
you were gifted in it.
But I did not give up music. Everything I produce
Yeah.
has music,
Okay,
has a
that's nice.
musical rug, everything. And I even wrote 3 songs during the pandemic that I'm still shopping.
Mhm.
So I did not give it up. I just incorporated it differently.
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
And sometimes, just original tracks if I can get some of my friends to do. I mean, I even have a sitar. I brought a sitar from it. I have instruments all over my house.
Mhm.
Because I love music. I don't play everything. My flute's somewhere still in my garage, but different things. And I have all kinds of keyboards, that I have. I have I'm a professor emerita now, so I still have an office on campus, but there's a keyboard in my drawer,
Mhm.
so whenever I want to just keep my notation up because I've started in the last month or so because I had a piano teacher that I was going to and even during the pandemic, we were doing it by Zoom.
Oh, that's nice.
And then, again, I got busy with something. I started writing, and this book came from a collection of video interviews with my brother in law for several years.
Mhm.
I would just videotape. So I guess the transitioning because I'll just finish my story.
Mhm.
Since the academe, then the PhD, and then I got recruited to the University of Tennessee. In fact, my master's department head, radio TV, became the chair at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville,
Mhm.
and he had me come there, and again, the first person, the first, African American woman. I'm still the only, um, person, African American, ever elected president of faculty senate. I'm in the Hall of Fame there. I
Wow.
mean, again, but when I saw problems, because even in that school, when I got there, there were a lot of things. Remember, I'm a New Yorker, and then I end up in Southern Illinois, and then I'm in the mountains of Tennessee.
Very Caucasian parts of the United States.
And, but I'm crazy. Remember, I tell people, New Yorkers, we learn socialization on the subway. So I was in the face of all different cultures growing up. That's all I know.
Mhm.
So this black and white thing or whatever, that was quite foreign to me. I didn't understand because that was not my experience. I remember when I was in Tennessee and there were no Latinos. And the first time I saw a Latino in the store. I mean, I actually went to them. I was so excited, because I lived in Spanish Harlem for a while. I mean, I just love all different cultures, and that was my life growing up.
You were a New York child through and through.
A New York trial, even when I still say quarter and water,
Yeah.
I'm a New Yorker. So that was, just my life. So to go in these environments, and again, just like the Rape is a Reality series. I got there, nobody was talking about race relations and stuff like that. And it was not the front part of my game, but I was on television. I was on a commercial station. I was actually invited. I was on the Tennessee Report as I was the only woman. And this was during the time that Clinton Gore. I was invited there to just talk about the election. And with all these guys, Ron McMahon, he was actually a big time Republican. Warren Gooch was a big time Democrat in Tennessee. So they were very, very big. The anchor of the show. And then I came on, but I did so well, I guess, duking with the guys that they invited me to join the show.
Oh, that's nice.
So I was on the air for about 4 or 5 years. Our show was so popular. Um, we followed Brinkley
Mhm.
during that time that Brinkley was on. You were probably you it was during your time.
It was during my time. I remember Gore and Birch
Right, right.
but I
N
yeah.
Yeah, but this week with Brinkley was a show. It was almost like, George Stephanopoulos is, that same, and we followed that show, but we were getting a 4 and 5 rating on a Sunday, which was, pretty good for a show, and they would actually send our show to the governor. That's how, topical it was. So, again, and then I had a show that I produced the weekend with my students. So, I was on the air commercially, and then I had on the ABC affiliate, and I had a show with my students on the CBS affiliate. And again, incorporating music, and everything. And then again, those other shows, I had a show called Out and About
Mhm.
where I did, a lot of stuff out, just nature stuff because I love nature.
Mhm.
And so, um, by the time I spent 14 years at the University of Tennessee, all the way up to my full professorship. Again, and I was running that too. I got tenured a year early
Oh,
and I got full professor as soon as I was eligible. I've won some awards that um, no person of color that won. Again, the first. I'm tired of the first because, there's still so many talented people. I could have been maybe bolder, a little bit to just get that attention. But there were so many brilliant minds out there.
mhm.
And so my goal after that was trying to get as many people through as possible as I could, as far as mentoring, et cetera, et cetera. And how I ended up in Florida because they were trying to get me for about 3 years. I went there in an endowed chair, but I only was supposed to be there a year. Tennessee was trying to get me back. I stayed on leave for 2 years, and that's at Florida A&M University. And so I went from a big majority white institution to an HBCU,
Mhm.
but they let me write my own jobs description.
Oh, that's
My
nice. Yeah.
PhD, as I said, was in my PhD was in technology and education. And my dissertation was the second in the country on technology and higher education, and I use NASA, broadcasters, and educators, and but I had so much in broadcasting that my career up to my full professorship and all of that at the University of Tennessee was all in broadcasting. But how they actually stole me, they literally let me write my own job description, and I started the distance learning, new technology, instructional technology at Florida A&M University.
And that would have been what, like the early 2000s or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I went there in '97. I stayed there, on leave until when by the time we got to 2000, they, said, "You either have to come back or stay," and then I decided to stay. By that time, I was just building it, the distance learning, but I had hired people, and all of that. So that yeah, that was start of the 21st century.
Mhm.
And, and then I've I had so many jobs there. I was the chief information officer. I was vice president of research, the assistant vice president of, in the provost's office, academic affairs. I was the interim dean. Um, I was over international, again, but that was an institution where, and I guess President Frederick Humphreys, who they're going to unveil a statue in his honor, because he passed in a couple of weeks. He said, "The University of Tennessee can't use all of your skills like we can."
Mhm.
And they let me use I never worked so hard in my life, but I was able to use all of my skills, and as I said earlier, even as a little kid, I'm sort of a builder. I like to build things from the ground up, and that was very, very exciting.
Well, it seems like
Mm.
you did that at every step.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the one thing I could say as far as my career. I just said that my colleague here, actually was at, FAMU with me, and we were talking about that because she was hoping that I was staying there as dean, but then, I just decided to retire. I was on the board of Florida Virtual School from its inception, and then I stayed on that for, close to 18 years, and actually, the president passed, and they asked me to come off the board, and I was interim president for about 3 or 4 months,
Mhm.
and then they took over the school, and by that time, I said, I'm done." So, it's like I've gone sort of a full circle because I'm back to even though I have all of those other pieces during the pandemic, I decided to, really get into all those digitize all those interviews and stuff because my brother-in-law passed
Mhm.
in 2015
Mhm.
and, decided to get involved and started writing because I was in Tallahassee and I was by myself, so I had to keep from going crazy. So I did music, I did my writing. I actually had just started with golf,
Oh, wow.
so I could go to the I can go to the golf range because it was far part, right, and so that's also become sort of a new passion of mine. I've been in a few tournaments now,
Oh,
and,
that's exciting.
I'm starting to get a few trophies up there, so, again, but what was interesting about golf is something that you can play by yourself.
Mhm.
You go to the range because remember that introvert part of me still exists, even though somebody talking to me would never know.
Mhm.
But, my sister and my sister would have to convince people that I will come back because I always have to go off by myself. I always have to have time to think. We're even, at the Lowies now. I mean, I even moved into a suite because I got to have room
Mhm.
to walk and think and all of that, because that's just part of my MO.
Mhm. And being out in nature and getting all that fresh air and stuff like that is a great way to think and clear your mind and
Right,
air.
right, and, to just get out of your head. I'm sure that that's probably why you enjoy doing what you do.
100%. I have my best ideas when I'm out in the middle of nowhere.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Ye
yeah,
So let's just dump back or drive back a little bit. So March 2020 hits and you're stuck indoors
right.
and your brother-in-law passed away in 2015 and you had been kind of collecting writings and interviews and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, but, again, remember, he's in my life from 11 years old, so I lived the story.
Mhm.
So it's not just like I'm dealing with something that I don't know about. I've actually lived the story, but and again, and like he called me little Dada. I was like their baby, that they were raising. So I had all of this exposure to the groups, like, riding in the limos as a kid, being backstage, being in recording studios and stuff. So I knew the story, but I decided, especially when around 5 years before he sort of passed, and I know that he was sort of struggling with, you this is your whole life and this is all you do. What do I do? So he was still recording music until he died.
Mhm.
But Gladys Knight and the Pips, to just start from, the beginning of the story. This is a coming of age story. I mean, and his particular story, I mean, because people don't know that how the group started. You have the Temptation story out there, you have the Jackson 5 story out there. I mean, you still don't have the Four Tops as a friend, but there are various stories that have been created. But the Gladys Knight and the Pip story is not out there.
Right, even the Commodores, I'm quite familiar with them and stuff like that, 'cause Lionel Richie came out of there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So how my brother-in-law, he would tell you that he was probably seen in the womb because his life, this book starts with his family, his grandmother and mother and uncle and all of them singing and playing music on the back porch in Georgia, where all the neighbors would come to listen to them play. And Uncle played guitar, and Mama Tilly, his grandmother, she sang. She actually taught him how to sing harmony as a little boy while she was cooking in the kitchen.
Mhm.
His sister Eleanor, because people don't know that the group was called the Pips, and it consisted of my brother-in-law, William Guest, his sister Eleanor Guest, Gladys Knight, her brother Bubba Knight, and their sister Brenda Knight. That was the original Pips, not the Gladys Knight and the Pips everybody knows.
Mhm.
So they were in the kids' choir because they're all, related. And the parents were in the adult choir.
And this is all just in
This
Southern
is
Georgia?
all this is all in Mount Moriah Baptist Church.
Oh, wow.
So all of this is going on. So, and I write visually so that you could see. So there they are, little kids, they're singing, and the parents are saying, well,
What year would that have been? Just so we have a time reference.
well, this is it. This is the early 1950s.
Okay.
Okay. So it's say it's Bubba's Merrill Bubba Knight. It's his 10th birthday party. Okay, so they decide that they're gonna have a birthday party, the parents in one room and the kids are. Well, during that time, you probably don't remember this, they had little hand record players. Their friend that you carried around with little kids, and it had the little, 45 records that you could play on it.
Mhm.
Well, the, Garfield, their little friend down the street, had a record player, they didn't. Garfield came over with his record player, so they were having a great time playing these 45 records, all the hits of the '50s. That would have been the Frankie Lymans and all of the stuff that I was talking about earlier. Um,
And they get
those
all these legends that played the Apollo.
right,
Yeah.
that's right. So Garfield had to go home early, which meant that he had to take his record player. So what they did, the kids, they just decided they knew a lot of songs, so they started just singing
Mm.
together and singing in harmony. And they caught the attention of their parents. And they say, wow, these kids sound good together. Now they've been singing in a choir and stuff. So they decided, well, let's form a group.
Mhm.
So they formed a group, and they were just still singing in church and then singing at little clubs and stuff around Atlanta, centers and stuff like that, various kind of religious type things.
And they would have been like 10, 12. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it's
wow.
10, 12. They were still, and I guess my brother-in-law is a little bit older, so they were maybe like in middle school because then they were going on to, by the time I got into high school, they were really like singing around town. And, getting back to William and his sister Eleanor, I mean, and it's in the book when they first went to school and a teacher just gave them a horn and gave her, so they just started playing it.
No lessons, no nothing. They just
Right,
had they had an ear.
they had that ear.
Yeah.
I mean, all of them sang. I mean, James Cleveland, who was a big gospel person, Eleanor, even up because she's deceased too, Eleanor Guest, she was part of his choir and stuff. But getting back to the kids, so they formed a little group. They didn't even have a name. So they started getting so popular that people started requesting them.
Hmm.
So they said, well, we need a name. They had a cousin named Pip.
Oh, wow.
So Pip was sort of like was going around. The parents would carry them around, and then Pip started carrying them around. So when they got to discuss the name, and they decided, well, Pip, we should be, you're our cousin, and you've been taking us around. So can we use your name? And they became the Pips. That was the original group, which they contend that was still the best group and the best singers.
Oh, wow. Even
Okay.
to this day. Or,
Yeah,
yeah.
even till, well, all are deceased except for Big Gladys and Bubba.
Hmm.
So they started getting these requests, and then ironically, they had someone, they started getting ripped off really early. Someone decided, okay, well, we got this equipment, recording equipment. Why don't you kids come over and let's see how you sound on this recording equipment. They had no idea this person recorded the song and put it out. My brother-in-law was walking down the street, and that's when the record shops, they used to play the music out onto the street,
Right, to get everyone to come in.
get
Yeah.
everybody to come in, and he heard the record on the radio and ran all the way to Bubba's house, and Bubba says, "I already know, baby bro." They call him baby bro. "I already know. I heard it." Well, he had put this record out. They didn't even know, but it got attention of a DJ named Patton. Well, it got attention of Bobby Robinson in New York, who got in touch with Patton, the DJ, wanting to find these kids.
Even though the record had been put out illegally by some guy who
Right.
gifted them.
But this is the story of how they became Gladys Knight and Pips.
Okay.
So Bobby Robinson gets in touch with them and decides that he wants to bring them up to New York. Now, Eleanor and Brenda, they decide, this is Bubba and Gladys' sister, and my brother-in-law says, they decided that they wanted, by this time, because by this time they're in high school or just about graduating high school, that they want to get married.
Have like a normal life.
Right. So then they got Langston, who was a fourth Pip. At one time there was four, and cousin Edward. Well, they went up to New York, and Bobby Robinson, he knew that they had not signed a contract or anything for the song. So this song, even though it was out, and it wasn't out all over, because you could really kind of spotlight in various areas of the country during that time. You might have put out a record in the South that then made its way around to the Philly market or the New York market or the Detroit market, which were the big markets at that particular time.
And was that an original song? What was the name of that song that kind of first broke them out?
Every beat of my heart. It wasn't original.
There's a cover, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a cover. So Bobby Robinson talks them into, and the parents were up there too. Well, let's re-record this song and I'll put it out, on my label.
And actually pay you guys.
Well,
Or maybe
that's
not.
another story. Right. And so he says, but to not confuse it with the other one, we need to change the name, and that's how it became Gladys Knight and the Pips, because all of them could lead.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of them could lead. And, because when when Gladys went and got married, had kids, they put out songs by themselves.
Mhm.
And not only back there in the early 60s, they did it again later on in the 80s. But anyway, so they put out the Gladys Knight and the Pips version of it, and it just soared.
Mhm.
and the Apollo and all the stuff and on the all the road stuff where they got very, very much involved and on the road at that point. But Bobby Robinson was a crook too. And it's so funny because my mother knew Bobby Robinson. She introduced, because when my sister went to the studio, she knew Bobby and Bobby, they were recording, they knew this group. So my mother took my sister and stuff, and that's where they first met.
Mhm.
But my sister was like 15, 16 at the time, so they didn't date or anything. But, all of the families, when, if anyone reads the book, will, I said they find out a lot about the Knight family, Guest family, and the Ziegler family, because we became one family. And so that became the hit record, and then they had some other records after that. Well, Gladys was married to the saxophone player, and she went home to have a baby,
Mhm.
okay? And then the guys were left. They didn't wanna, they didn't wanna leave New York. By that time, they were into New York. So Bobby, they're still recording. My brother-in-law wrote the song Linda and Darling, and the Pips just recorded those songs
Without Gladys.
without Gladys.
Mhm.
Well, they all of a sudden they weren't getting, but back during those days, a lot of the artists were getting ripped off. They weren't getting their royalties and stuff, and when it came time to pay, oh, well, those suits that you all have and all of this cost and whatever. So they were still being ripped off.
Isn't that
Well,
terrible?
it was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful. Well, they happened to meet my brother-in-law, who again he and my sister weren't dating at the time. He met little Margarita, and who was Marguerite May's granddaughter. Marguerite Mays had been married to Willie Mays,
The famous baseball player?
right?
Mm.
And she'd been married to one of the Ink Spots, which was a singing group back in the 50s. Okay. So she got very interested. And then one night they were over there, and the granddaughter introduced the guys to Marguerite, and she was familiar with the group. So, what happened, the relationship build, and she says, "Look," she told the guys, "Look, I think you all are doing okay, but I think that you would do much better if you all would get Gladys back and then, become a group again."
Did Gladys wanna retire, or did she just wanna take, like, a year off and have, like, a
Well,
family?
she just had the family, but I guess it wasn't decided at that point.
Mhm.
Margaret, they called her and convinced her to come back
And she went
to
back
New
down
York.
to Georgia?
No, they were in New York. They were still in New York. Yeah, she went back to Atlanta, so she went back to New York.
Yeah.
Well, Marguerite Mays, in the chapter in here that I call polishing the act, Marguerite Mays was the one who did that. My sister, as a matter of fact, today is visiting Pop Atkins' um, daughter-in-law. Pop Atkins, Charlie Atkins, Honey Cole,
Mhm.
Pyle, and Coles and Atkins used to be a tap dancing sensation
Okay.
back in the 40s, 50s. So Marguerite Mays took them and found Charlie Atkins. Like I said, in fact, when I spoke to Dolores earlier, she says, "I didn't think I was gonna see your sister ever again." This is how they go back like 50 something years.
Mm.
And Charlie Atkins, she asked him if he could teach them dance steps and stuff to polish up the act. Because they're known for their style, precision, and dance steps. And that's because of Charlie Atkins. Charlie Atkins, what he did, again, he was a tap dancer.
Mhm.
And the intricacies of these stories are I got on the tape. I knew the stories, but I got him to pull out other things through the interviews.
So so
Okay.
so before that, sorry to interrupt you. So before that, they were just great singers and great musicians, but they hadn't, like, put together, like, a full
I
act?
mean, they were doing their little dances and stuff, but it's like some of the groups now where they start out and they're not doing. See, they were known for precision,
Hmm.
period. And that, they were making up little routines, following some of the other groups they saw on television and stuff, but they have an act of their own now
Mhm.
as a result of Charlie Atkins. So, and how he started teaching them, he got a can and a pencil and just started
Tap.
tapping on it
Mm.
and getting those beats. That's how he taught, not with music first, just with beats. And that's how they started really polishing up and getting those precision dance steps, and how this sort of morphs up to when Barry Gordy meets them and wants them and at Motown.
That's huge.
Okay, he wants them at Motown. But he doesn't only want Gladys Knight and the Pips. He wants Charlie Atkins too. He sees what Charlie Atkins has done, but Charlie Atkins says, "Yeah, I'll come and work with your group, but I'm going to continue to work with Gladys Knight and the Pips." So Barry Gordon, after they leave Bobby Robinson and they go to Motown, they again, Motown is now a whole other culture.
And this is Motown Records. This is a label.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Barry Gordy, Motown label. But they have a whole interculture with their acts. So not only are they teaching them how to dance, they teaching the females how to model. I mean, they're walking with books on their heads
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So they have this whole culture behind Motown where all of their groups are sort of following this program.
Mhm.
But Charlie Atkins makes not only the Pips great, but then he's working with the Temptations and all the other male groups.
The Temptations and
Four Tops,
yeah,
and so on and so forth. And,
Miles Davis was at Motown Records at that time, I think, too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just, the Marvelettes, who's just in fact, the one of the Marvelettes wrote the, foreword of the book, and she passed, like, about 3 months before it came out.
Mm.
So, but I was up there, in July, and they're still keeping on her tradition where they do picnics
Mhm.
and once a year. And so to see the children of these Motown artists who are still coming together was just wonderful and exciting. So um, they go there in Motown, and of course, I heard it through the grapevine. Boom, that becomes one of their big hits, and so on and so forth. But what people don't know is that Gladys really didn't want to go to Motown.
Oh, really?
No, because you had the Marvelettes, you had Diana Ross and the Supremes, or the Supremes at that time, you had the Shirelles, you had all of these female giant groups, and she thought that she would get lost in all of that. So they also maintain a little bit of independence as far as where they performed and stuff like that. They they were part of the Motown reviews, but they were also doing their own thing where they had their own booking agents and stuff like that. So eventually, it got to the point where, again, they did not think that they were getting the contract or the money they were supposed to get because, Barry Gordon wasn't a saint in this business either.
I don't think you can get to that level by being a saint.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, um, they wanted a certain amount of money in the contract, and Barry Gordon didn't want to give it to them. So here comes Buddha Records. They had already knew um, Cecil Hollingworth and Neil Kasich, so they already knew the people who ran that. So they gave them the contract they wanted, the money they wanted, and the spotlight they wanted to concentrate just on them.
And they had to leave Motown to find
And
it.
they had to leave Motown.
Mm.
So that's when Midnight Train, that's when the New York, I mean, the Grammy Awards,
Mhm.
the Music Awards, American Music Awards, all of those things started blossom. I mean,
Blew up.
they just blew up globally,
Mhm.
so they are going traveling all over the world, and they're dancing. They're known for those pip snaps and those moves and stuff.
And this is what, like late 70s, early 80s when they blew up?
No, this is like 60s going into late 60s going into 70s.
Okay, so I'm a decade ahead. Yeah, so yeah, a little bit
Yeah,
further
I
back.
mean, because by the time they get to the 80s, because like in the 80s, they were signed to 3 different record companies. Gladys was signed to Columbia on her own, Gladys Knight and the Pips were signed to Buddha, and the Pips were signed to Casablanca. They did an album on their own just as the Pips. So,
That's confusing.
yeah, just, right, and it was, but that's when, they did, Claudine, they did the musical track for that particular film, so they were venturing out in different things, in the '70s and stuff, Disco Bells, that's when I was running that part, all of that was going on, so William and Edward had their little projects, Gladys and Barbara and all of them, so they were starting to splinter off into different things.
So hard to keep a band together, isn't it?
Right. Well, they were together 39 years,
Well, it's not bad.
which is, good for most. So by the time 89 comes around, is when they finally broke up. But then in '95, they're inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Dionne Warwick was just inducted 2 years ago. They all came up together. Not saying that it's fair, but they had reached that level because there are a lot of people who are being inducted now who go way back, who were performing at the time, but, they got inducted very early, in their career compared to some of these other groups who were around that I see just being inducted, in the last few years. So, but the whole Motown, Buddha, and all of that, all of the different things. My brother-in-law wasn't a saint, so there's a chapter in their Love Overboard, which is one of their songs, so that talks about the outside children and stuff like that, which he admits, and then it's like interviews with my sister and my, nephew and niece, because they say, "Why?" See, it's so funny because they divorced, but they never left each other. I mean, he was upstairs, but they stayed together until he died,
Mm.
technically, but she'll say in here, that he became more of a brother. But again, we were one family, and we just took care of each other. That's how we were raised. But he was such a big personality, and so protective and brought so much joy to so many people. And Charlie Atkins would say that he was the best dancer because he would get the steps precise, and then they talk about his outside project. We talk about the Four Tops, Levi Stubbs, because Deborah Stubbs, his daughters, is still a good friend. My sister and her in the same church. They, Edward and William, they had cousins and other relatives. They produced the Stubb Girls
Okay.
in Detroit. So, up until the time he died, he was still doing music and was gonna trying to record some, songs on his own. So,
Once it's in you, you can't ever get rid of it, can
right,
you? Yeah.
right. But, the journey is also spiritual. When people say what is this story about? It's about family, it's about faith, it's about love, and it's the coming of age and all of the things, that happens on that journey. I mean, they would pray before each performance. Everything was a vote. How they got to Motown, they voted Gladys out. She was the only vote that didn't want to go. So there were some things, that just stayed with them, that family faith, that love, that foundation, and harmony was more than the harmony of music, it was a harmony of spirit. So that thread combined and all of that, so the book is not only of the great era of music, but it's about, little kids coming together with a dream that really blossom into something very, very special. And then having that love forever, even though when you're in pain from breakup and stuff like that, that family faith and love still stays there to bring you all together. So, I mean, the story was, again, and important to me because I learned so much even growing up about, my family were close. My grandmother had 22 grandchildren. We all grew up together.
22.
Yeah, she has 6 children and 22 grandchildren. I mean, after I leave here and I go back, Tuesday, I'm meeting a cousin in Destin Beach, where first we still stay together. So it was that, the things that he taught us as a family, he was very, very protective, about staying together. And I watch my niece and nephews, how they have incorporated some of the things besides the fact these nephews look just like him and, just do certain things, but how that glue, I mean, because we were brought up with that glue of family that is still maintained. When I was in Detroit in July, I was hanging out with my niece and nephews, and we were down um, listening to what they call house music in Detroit. We were hopping, so all just doing the same thing with listening, enjoying music. My niece sang a little bit, but his granddaughter, Terry, she is carrying on. She's the singer
Okay.
and she's doing rock and stuff now. She started and she'll tell you, yeah, I know it's about R&B, but she's a real rocker with that energy. So we still got a guest family member in there. So carrying on the musical part. And again, I wrote this book because the story has not been told at all, and it is a story as exciting as the Jackson 5. Gladys Knight and the Pips are the ones who discovered the Jackson 5 and introduced them to Berry Gordy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so, if you Google it, it's out there, but just, telling their story in this music, I mean, my goal is still that should be a film. Because there's so many exciting stories in this book. Because he was such a storyteller. In fact, he was so good. I used to believe like all of the stuff, and he was so humorous. But these road stories
Mhm.
with what even happened to them, they were on the way to a gig in the South. They're really young then, and like the late 50s. So you can imagine they get stopped by the police in order to get let go and go on to their gig. They made them sing, out there in the dirt roads and stuff like that. But, some of just the stories, but the stories in life that you get through and you're better for them.
Mhm.
There's no sad story in here. Everything is about growth and evolution and about that dream that became a reality, that has left a whole historical plate of music for those that have the appetite for it.
Yeah, and the way you're telling the story and the way you've written the book, like you almost put together the scenes to make the film. Like, the
Already.
scenes in Georgia, the tea rooms.
Look, I have treatments written. Yeah. I have a whole series of scenes and stuff for the film. I mean, it's so, again, but I came out of broadcasting, so I write visually. Everything like I tell people ask, even with me and the technology, how did I transition to the technology so well? Everything on a computer started on television.
Mhm.
So it was very easy for me to incorporate, the text, the graphics, the music, photos and stuff like that because that's how, I live. So it's yeah, it's there.
What a journey.
It's there. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the journey because the journey is not over. I mean, this story has to be told. And because it's fun too.
Mhm.
There's a lot of laughter in this book. And it's because even I'm smiling big just thinking about him because he was so funny. I mean, and like some of the stories, and this is why I have, 15, 16 tapes. We would be up at night and just talking about, just stuff like that. And I would have him, and he would tell it in so many different ways. The hardest part for me was, first of all, getting all of transcribing all of this stuff and getting the best story
Mhm.
out because it was told in so many different ways and then incorporating that. But, because I have that sort of edit brain, which is why I could do news because I would have my pieces edited in my head by the time I get back
Mhm.
to the station.
How do you feel kind of being the incubator of this journey and of this story of Gladys Knight and the Pips and everything like that? Like, how do you feel being responsible to share that story and to get this out into the world? Because you were part of this extended family.
Right.
You lived it, and now you have the chance to share it. I'm just curious, how responsible you feel for getting that out into the world.
Well, I feel more excitement
Hmm.
than responsibility because see, I can get out of when it goes to the next step, it's something building from the bottom up again.
Hmm. Your specialty.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I love to do. So, I mean, even in right now, that old Mac computer, I had somebody take it to one of my staff because that's where all my digital tapes are
mhm.
to go ahead and transfer all that stuff. I don't want to digitize it again because if I have to start even with, a doc and I didn't have, I had a decent camera, but I didn't have a camera of the quality that I would like, and, one of the things, but just like writing, I mean, Alex Haley was one of my mentors, and I remember when I first started writing in academe and he read my thesis, he says, "No, you need to take out this chapter." It was a chapter on Max Robinson,
Mm.
which a lot of people still don't know about Max Robinson, but Max Robinson was the first Black network anchorman. You talking about chops, he had a broadcasting voice and he was on radio, but they would use his voice, and then they would put him behind the scene with and he would say, "I could be heard, but I couldn't be seen."
Mhm.
And I had an opportunity to spend, I mean, maybe 5 or 6 hours with him. And, I spent that time, and I, again, did the transcription, and I ended up putting an article out in the Journal of Black Studies, and then his brother, Louis Lomax, who did a lot of work in Africa, stuff and adventurers and stuff like that. What makes me happy is, I didn't have to do it for I wasn't a Lomax, but that Lomax, he was so grateful that his brother's story was told because Max died very, very young.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, even in the it's not too much. I would teach all of my students, but everybody did not know about him. It's just like,
Seemed like a real pioneer.
oh yeah, he was a real pioneer. And just and believe it or not, the two important people in my life, well, more than two important, but two that I would highlight now, William Guest and Alex Haley. Would you believe they ended up on a plane together, first class, side by side?
Mhm.
And if I wanted 2 people to meet, that would be it, and Alex told my brother-in-law I was in Knoxville, Tennessee, at the University of Tennessee that time, that he was gonna make Tennessee, so he says, "Well, my sister is in Knoxville, Tennessee, Dhyana Ziegler." Says, "Dr. Z." Everybody calls me Dr. Z. Alex made that famous. He said, "I can't say Dhyana or Ziegler." I said, "Well, just call me Dr. Z." So he would take me with him. In fact, I'm in his documentary that Warner Brothers produced
Mhm.
because I was supposed to just help with production. They found out how close we were, and I got 3 good sound bites. I mean, Holly Berry, look out, oh, they're all in it,
Oh, wow.
but I spent, so much time with Alex, but they got a chance to meet, and they both had so much to do with my life and my writing because Alex used to show me those sardine cans. He says, "I ate these sardine cans," and I just showed, one of my old staff members a letter that he dictated to me when he was, out on a ship on Christmas Day, and he talks about roots and stuff that I have framed in my house. But if it were not because I was a young scholar, when you first start in academia, you get your first Ph.D. and they're pushing you about, your first publications and stuff like that, especially at these large institutions. And I was used to winning, 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 and I'm getting rejected. And then Alex says, "Hey, carve this one out." And then from that, just because he gave me sort of a direction, and even though I started doing more academic research type methodologies and stuff like that, that's why this one was fun. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to think theory. I mean, I could turn this into something theoretical and put all that spin on. But this was a fun, just a gift that I was given and a gift of love that I wanna give back,
Very personal.
and very, very personal. And, I used to be on the, chair of the Florida Commission on the Status of Women, and I was at an event just this Tuesday, the, Hall of Fame, Florida Hall of Fame induction, and we are the ones who are responsible for getting the list and giving to the governor, and he picks 3 inductees. And, one the new chair, we're just sitting up there, and she came to the table, we're sitting with all the other commissions, because I still if they're in Tallahassee, I still go out, and she says, "I love your book." I mean, and the way she just said it with all this, it still kinda takes me back a little bit, even though the book has won 4 awards and I'm up for this Author of the Year. It still takes me back because it's so personal, it's my family. And, for people to say that they love it, it just lets me know. And then everyone, and even some of the other people I've had, interviews with, by the time they finish talking, they say the same thing. Well, this needs to be a film.
As a writer, how difficult was it for you to have so much of your career focused on academic writing, and then now to have to do this Midnight Train from Georgia and have that be writing, but from such a personal place?
Well, it was fun because that's the way I started out. Remember poetry
Mhm.
and stuff. In fact, I got this whole file I just found because I write on anything, and I put these things in I have all these little pieces of paper. They used to tease me, say I'm gonna be out giving a speech, and I'm be pulling out all these little pieces that I've written because that's how I start things, and I just keep things in, like, folders. And for this, again, this was probably harder for me to write than the academic stuff because it was so personal.
That's
And
interesting.
I thought that, everyone else would be looking or judging. I mean, it took a while for my sister to read it, and I'm saying, "You have to read it. This is your story." And then she says, "Wow." She read it, says, "I could see every part of this," and that's what I want. So, you know, I wrote it to be visual, and again, I mean, I've done a play. I got a draft of a play. I've done, film scenes and stuff, just taking it to the next step because
I see a musical.
yeah, yeah.
I see like a Hamilton-esque kind of musical about life growing up in Georgia and making it big in New York,
Right, right.
and
And, it's so funny you should mention that because I've been throwing out some of my papers and I just found the play.
Mhm.
Because I did the play when I just had like drafts and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had somebody who was in theater and I'm close to theater people. So you're speaking it into divine justice
You
here
made me
in my
almost cough.
spirit.
You made me almost cough when you said you almost threw out your plate. That would have been terrifying. I'm just trying to catch my breath here.
Yeah, and see, probably on that Mac that I'm getting everything transferred, it's probably the draft, but I said, "Look, but I have the hard copy." And see, that's the thing. People tease me because I have to have backups.
Oh, yeah.
I just no, I gotta have it on print. I gotta have a disc here. I gotta have, a disc here. I gotta have it in different ways, in case something happened to it. In fact, I have my all of my interviews with Alex. I mean, I had a 30-minute aired all a visit with that's aired all over PBS back in the 90s and stuff like that. But I have all and I have it on 1 inch, 1 inch. 1 inch don't it doesn't even exist anymore.
Right.
But I used to take the 1 inch and 3/4, but I have all this stuff in storage, original. all of my, like, interviews because I was gonna have my own personal library, at some point that will still, come I still have a lot of juice and a lot of ideas of things that I still wanna do.
Absolutely. Well, maybe this Midnight Train from Georgia book that you've put together, it's the beginning of more, maybe more of your personal writing and taking more of the things that have happened in your life. Because, when you tell me that you were part of this extended family with Gladys Knight and the Pips, and you wrote a book about it, right away I'm like, that's amazing. But then I listened to your story as well. You've got 4 or 5 more books in there.
Like, and everyone, it's so funny because, a lot of people, even as I'm doing these interviews, they start out with the book, but then they wanna they wanna know a little bit about my story. And they said, "Well, when are you gonna write your memoir?" And I said, "I'm still living it." Although during the pandemic. Now, I wrote about my academic life,
Mhm.
academia in black and white, because I was at 2 different type institutions. So I wrote all of that in the grad school part. So I've written part of it,
Mhm.
but some of the rest is still, unfolding.
Mhm.
And, there are a couple of more out there for sure.
Couple more chapters, couple more books, some things that are
Yeah,
stowing.
some
Yeah.
things that, are staring around. I got a collection of essays I want. And then I'm working on a fun book. I also, I'm into photography and I've been doing a lot of things on various types of different bird species and stuff. And what I've done is I put thoughts in their minds. So as I grab them, I got little captions, so I'm hoping to the director of graphics, I just talked to him about it last week that I want him to illustrate it for me,
Mhm.
and, I have the pictures and the little sayings, and, it's just something fun and happy.
Yeah. The world needs a little more of that these days.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for
And good
sure.
music.
And good music.
Yeah.
And, my endowed chair was in ethics now, and I definitely well, I guess I don't wanna put this out because then it wouldn't be my idea because I know somebody will hop on it, but we need to do more in ethics and morals
Absolutely.
as well.
So is there one story that you kinda wanna leave us with here about from the book maybe, or something that didn't make it into the book that's quite close to you from your time with Gladys Knight and the Pips and being in that extended family?
Well, I mean, there are so many stories, but, again, some of the fun times of just being backstage and just staying up all night and laughing and telling they would do something that's called joning. That would be they would be messing with each other, called joning on each other,
Mhm.
and them talking about each other and different things that they do, like Edward had bad feet. So there was always a story about him because if you watch him, he's landing on his feet a lot lighter than any of the others because his feet would hurt. My brother-in-law, he was scared of cats.
Oh, really?
He was so scared of cats. It was like he would be jumping all over the place. Some of those stories, are in there. But then, um, how they used to just tease each other, and some of the things that they did as kids, just for fun and just mischievous. That's what I'm saying. It's a coming of age story where it's so much fun. But, I think that sometimes, and it didn't happen with the Temptations, but sometimes when you put a one name out front, some of the backgrounds in people's mind, they're in the background. But this group was in the foreground.
Mhm.
If you think about Midnight Train from Georgia, everybody sings that song. They sing the background. See, the background with the Glass Line and the Pip songs, the background is as important as the lead.
Well, you told me anyone
It
could have led.
Right,
Yeah.
and so the background of the songs, if somebody listened to it, and the singing, and it's because of that foreground, that melody, so they created something yeah, I'm not even sure if they realize it, but as I talk about it, I realize that, it was all about the melody and the harmony. So, I would say the the one thing that I would say to anyone who's picking this up, that they will see a pathway.
Hmm.
So the book is not, because I often they're asked, well, it was a certain period of time, yes. A certain group, yes. But the stories and the pathways, um, it's now.
They still exist now.
They still exist now. I mean, some of the things and some of the moral behavior, the spiritual behavior, the meaning of family, and how you stay together. Because even with all the pain of the group breaking up, he would never in all of his life say anything bad about the group. I mean, even things that I may know,
Mhm.
that's not part. His whole light is to shine the best light on this group, and he wanted his life to have some meaning. And I remember one of his good friends, he said at the funeral, he said, they probably may not have always gotten it right,
Mhm.
but he had that meaning. He was always striving, for the right path and do the right thing, which is why I think that he and my sister, and she was there till the day he died. We were all there for his last breath.
Mhm. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Truly an amazing story.
yeah.
So this is it right here, Midnight Train from Georgia. And may I call you Dr. Z? I quite like that.
Yeah, yes, yes.
And where can we find out more about the book and more about yourself?
Well, you can Google me and you can find out a lot about me and the book. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books. If they don't have it, you tell them to get it. And look forward to that musical or that film.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan has put me in. He's motivated me on a specific task now.
I love it. I think, these musical biographies are so exciting, especially when
Yeah.
you've got the group dynamic.
Mhm.
Like obviously they had the Elvis Presley one a few years ago.
Yes.
But I always like that group dynamic because there are those interchangeable moments between, having this group come together and kind of pursue one goal as a group. I always find that so much more challenging as a storyteller to because everyone has their own ambitions and their own goals, and for
Right.
everyone to kind of put the individual aside and move forward as a collective.
But that's why I said harmony is more than harmony of voices, the harmony of spirit.
Right.
That's another thing that's sort of different
Mhm.
about this book. I mean, you see a lot of those other groups, a lot of them broke up a lot earlier. They didn't stay for 39 years.
It's a
But
real.
it was that harmony of spirit that kept them together. And there are not many. I mean, there groups that are coming up that I hope will stay together that long. But a lot of these legacies, aren't here, and the business is so different now, even with the messaging. One thing I always call them, they're like an apple pie group. They were clean. There are no scandals out there. They just wanted to make music, make people happy, try to live good lives,
Mhm.
and give something back.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Z, thank you so much for swinging by. And when this comes out, I'll put links, to the book and everything like that so people can find it. And
Right.
good luck tomorrow with the awards. And I hope you win Best Author.
Right. Thank you so much. And this has been so wonderful to meet you and to have this conversation. You made it quite relaxing.
That's great because I'm terrible. I can't play a musical instrument or anything, but I'm always completely excited to hear stories about great musicians and great bands and just how they all come together. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you.
And now we just go up here so people can see we're in the same room. Well, one
Okay.
wonderful to meet you,
Wonderful to meet you too.
and good luck in LA and safe trips back to Florida.
Right. And I hope we have cross paths,
We have
cross again.
we have to.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.